Hello everyone, thanks very much to all the 30,000 subscribers, to anyone who contributed also for them to be here. No, of course, there are lots of you watching me as non-subscribers, as not even having a YouTube account. You're all welcome to join, by the way. I always make this 10,000 kind of video thank update because it's not really a rhetorical expression that this could have not been possible without you. I mean, it's literally what we're describing. You may argue, well, in several years, 30,000 subscribers is not that much, but millions of views, the sort of relentless support, through, in fact, the same subscriptions, the watch length, the memberships, the Facebook, Patreon support, etc., is all part of it. Right? Schwerpunkt has been consolidating as a point of reference for many people interested in history of warfare, religion, and more. And the channel has been constantly updating, developing to the degree by which the followers have validated it. I always post myself as a medium of some sort, as a disclosure of something sort of greater that we try here to analyze, to reflect upon. I don't want to make a point. This is just like a channel similar to the others, because part of the reason also why we are still 30,000, not 100,000, for example, is connected with my own limits, with what also the topics that the channel covers. To the degree, there's never a way to justify one's own failures to an extent, but it's important to appreciate that the qualitative dedication of the audience. I have a very high watch length, a very high average watch length, higher income for a number of views and so on than most channels, as a matter of fact. And so it's just a different way of looking at it. It's true that also subscribers at large are not anymore a measure of a YouTube channel's success. That's not what we are measuring Schwerpunkts by. However, for those who may see it like that, just in terms of size of the channel, its scale of reach, that is also something you don't immediately see. Like, I'm informed by YouTube analytics. I check this every once in a while. Also have channels updates every season, as you've seen also recently. But I can tell you that the dedication, the support, the appreciation is staggeringly high. Right? There was a time in YouTube where things were sort of even more conflictual. So admittedly, I don't know, YouTube eliminated the like-dislike ratio. I can only see it, and I think just as a concept, it was very high in favor of the channel before. At this point, it's virtually like everybody likes this. I get mostly just positive comments. Also, the sort of the negative ones do not come from a place of watching the content and or even understanding it at some point. So there are so many things about the channel I could tell. I was thinking these days, today I'm recording at a different time of the day because I have to do something else in the other, and it's sort of different, an unusual setting. And I was thinking in the previous days, like, what can I really tell for that? Because it seems like, oh my God, I arrived here, I couldn't major. Oh, not really. It's just like a day like another. It doesn't feel like, your participation today in individual terms is more relevant than it was yesterday. As I always said, even if, I managed to sort of inform a person about a certain historical topic that I never really thought of, etc. Like, I accomplished my mission. It's not the exclusive one. At this point, I admit that Schwerpunkt is primarily my personal sort of motivation to learn new things every day on top of what I do for a living. So it's a very pleasant sidebar, and it sort of occupies you. It makes you think about lots of aspects, politically, historically, culturally. It's incredibly challenging in that sense, and that's what I love. All right, because I love competition, especially with myself. And so arriving to 30,000 here is mostly like a milestone, a symbol that makes sense through my personal experience rather than the sort of datum of a few tens of thousands of subscribers that are, however, a lot. As it's completely normal, the majority does not engage with the channel. This is true for any other content out there. But I understand that there is a higher attention in the average, that something has changed also the way you interact with the channel, in part because times have changed. The channel also changed a little bit. It hopefully improved over the years. I think there is no doubt about that. So it's difficult from my side to see your perspective. Like, my own is clear. I'm ever more and better in charge of everything, and I am really working to improve not the entertainment side of the story, which may also come along just out of sheer practice. Like, I have my predicted times, but I improve my speech and also the same topics, the content, the video making, and so on. However, what matters here is the improvement in a bigger, sort of longer term sense, right? I have no idea whatsoever of how long the channel can last, given, I don't know, YouTube, the world, or whatever. That's not my horizon. I understand it could be the case that at one point Schwerpunkt will end, but I don't really see it incoming per se. But personally, I'm just motivated to continue. I'm just made like that, like to have this track and following it. It's many ways my life philosophy and attitude that you can see here. Or some of you ask me, how do you do it? Every day, these long videos, whatever, and you can see it's sort of original, it's sort of critical. There is really a lot to cover. I never exhaust what I want to cover, and I wasn't that hungry when I began this. Like, when you begin it, it's mostly like, I want to see how it turns out, and then you get involved into it. And I'm not sure whether a video like this is a good chance to talk about how I began and how it it went all across up to now. In a sense, it, because those videos that I started making almost every day since late 2018, even though the channel is slightly older, have showed how I operate, like what the content is about, how it sort of grew into what you can see now. Your side has always been the greater mystery, because, of course, most people just use YouTube or social media without even any need to interact with the so-called creators. This is a name we sort of use by habit. It sounds terrible if you think about that, but that's the technical term for YouTube's video makers, so to say. I realized that, of course, 30,000 people contains really a very mixed bunch. There are surely some sort of uniting features in this group. I can't quite see it, again, from the outer side, especially as you're not interacting in that vocal way. I see a great engagement, again, but not quite in the comment section, which I think is a positive thing in general, because it shows probably that the silent majority that I always kind of sympathized for, and not the loud one, or the one that also, of course, is not involved in this, because it's a matter of Schwerpunkt's level, right? What kind of people follow, right? Is overall a sign almost of civilization, of sort of capacity to absorb without sort of interfering too much, or without creating problems, making noise and all this stuff. This has always struck me. I understand also that my channel has become not necessarily more provocative. I think before there were more questions about the channel. Over the years, I sort of managed to smoothen, to respond, to criticize my own work, to look at it. It's not like we have really changed the fundamentals of it. They've always been the same. But say, I would never make videos like I used to make even just 5 years ago. And I really mean it, even in the approach to the subject matter rather than the technical side of the story. So we can say that the more time goes by, the more the channel improvements accelerate. It's not a simply linear growth. We are sort of much more punching. Like, the last couple of years have been a continuous stepping up that you may even not see from the analytics, but it's very much out there. one idea about my content is that I made so many videos that these numbers must be split for all of those. So this may add to the general variety of people who follow me. There are, again, certain trends. Sometimes they're not really even that, positive or constructive. Like I realized, for example, that all my videos about Indo-European stakes, or even recently about, I don't know, now Axis warfare and so on, they're obviously attracting people who think that generally do not understand that the entire fabric of the history that I'm providing is sort of critical of their beliefs, and they do not seem probably to understand that. Like, it's not like they're getting something out of this content that is in fact the most qualitative one that makes them pose some questions. They just think that staying here, I don't know, maybe is a way to support a certain. They don't understand my concepts of tradition or being beyond the far right or all this stuff. Equally, I must say that sort of, and this is interesting in particular because there are also tendencies that occur in the outer world that before my channel was more criticized by leftists. Now it isn't, even though I sort of consistently strengthened my sort of traditional standpoint. So it's difficult to understand what happens outside. It's a bit like with the algorithm. You can sort of understand what's going on, but you can never tell what kind of views you're going to make the next day, because even though you become sort of more sensitive in the guess, and positively so in the guess, still there is something that surprises you. And this is also the eternal process of learning. You never arrive to a point, and you never, and that is going to remain just that, right? You always develop. In part, you also forget there are some things about aging that are not pleasant. I'm fairly young, but obviously not that young anymore. Like in the last years, I sort of simply continued on my track. I have, as you know, you have all the story of the doctorate, of the so-called longest night, of all various issues that occurred to me in the past. You know that my channel has never been about me as a person. I never really found that important for the sake of this all. When it comes to this, you even wonder what's the point of it in general. Like, why would a person do this? Why would a person upload 2,600 videos and continue, even when, he would, even though I've gotten millions of views, I still, like, it's evident that I do this for some subtract reason that you don't see from the external, that I'm following my own trend. And if you have something in common with that, if you sort of appreciate, like, that's enough. Like, I don't need to tell you more about me, or again, even why I do this. And when I think about the latter aspect, though, it's obvious that after all these videos, and in the way I obviously relate with you through them, there must be some kind of better definition of what we're discussing. At the same time, this has always been a trait of my personality. I've never really I've never really made a particular effort to be understood by others, right? I've always thought that if you get it, you get it, and that trying to waste time, especially with explanations about sort of the deeper aspects to someone who simply does not want to understand it, is a waste of time, right? Either you're predisposed to certain things, either you're already sort of mature for them, or it's not really going to work. We have something that has really struck me during all these years is the amount of young people, especially in their early 20s, university students, that came to me and said, "Oh my God, like, I want to know what you believe in. I want to follow you as a sort of a source of, of beliefs, of worldview. I want to understand better what it is, etc." And that, I think it's normal, because people exactly in that age are very much in need, in search for such figures. But I've always done what I've done on this channel, and those are the more vocal persons. That's why I talk about them. I'd say I'm glad that some people found what I teach, basically, useful for them, to the point they would take me for this kind of overarching, almost paternal figure, but that's not exactly what I'm here for, right? It's not shyness. I'm not really a shy person, as a matter of fact. And so in personal life, I'm sort of more brutal than I sound on the channel. But let's say I think it is exactly how it must be. And if anything, I realized that the longer the search, the greater the work, the effort, etc., the more difficult it is to explain people what the goal is, even though the goal I think is somehow evident, right? Many channels I realize, because this year there's been a sort of YouTube views count apocalypse, and this has changed a lot in the algorithm, the visibility, not necessarily for I mean, in absolute terms, apparently for the worse, this was not a good thing for YouTube, but let's say I noticed that many, and this is a very common psychological reaction to that drop in views, especially in the bigger channels that sort of sow that more, switching to politics, for example, like saying, okay, I realize that makes more views and people are going to follow me more. I will try to do that now that I have more, let's say, a great visibility, talking about bigger channels and mine, so that I can secure some more stable position there. And it's mostly a matter of income. It's mostly a matter of, it's like an investment. That's what you're doing on YouTube, especially when you upload all the stuff. Maybe those are all saved. Maybe something was ever to accidentally happen to the channel, which at this point, in millions of views and especially thousands of videos, doesn't seem to have really. I've never received a single strike, alert, whatever. The worst thing that can happen is you make a video about National Socialism and they demonetize it because it's just about National Socialism. There isn't really anything about it. Never been sanctioned, never been properly even chasing, but many people here act paranoid, like say, oh, you can't truly talk about certain things because otherwise you will, but no, it does not exist. YouTube does not care. Actually, YouTube is a major receptacle for especially conservative voice. So regardless of all sort of varying political balance, let's say, in the world and on this platform and so on, and I realize there are problems, even worse ones, in a sense, I've never really been in that game, right? Many of you perhaps even told me, like, oh, it's better if you don't get political, because I hope it is not. I don't think that's even the point either. Like, the point with politics is that you can't, it's a gnostic heresy, really, to presume that when you make history, there's no politics into that. Like, whoever thinks that automatically, the person does not have a great deal of historical culture or general political maturity at the same time. When you're younger, you think that you can basically say whatever you want by presenting it, but with, like, facts, as if the facts were separated from interpretations. And unfortunately, some adults veer off from that by saying even things like, so it's all relative, and so there is no object. No, it's both things at the same time. It's just that our culture is not habituated to deal with either of them, right? If you look at X's posts, but whatever, however you're bombarded, you realize that there is almost another world that is being forged in that. But then you get out, you walk in the street, you see other people, and you realize that even though it's the same people who interact so crazily online, in a sense, that worldview, the negativity of it is not fake. It is there, but it is declined in a completely different way into real life. And we are, for the first time in history, experiencing this form of communication, which it is actually disastrous, but it is disastrous because people decide to essentially play on their own weakness and not to fix themselves, right? There isn't such a thing like, I don't know, there is an external agent that addicts you to something. The fault is always yours. The evil, the stupidity, the weakness is entirely yours if you fall prey of that. That's why, let's say, my ideas are also perhaps beyond most of, especially today's, concepts mostly played with, especially in what is the relatively conventional political scenario. It's difficult to talk about the new emergent sort of beliefs, topics, and kind of approaches to the world. There is evidently a collapse of some sort everywhere. And when I look at the channel, I realize that when, I'm followed and I'm able to talk history so straightforwardly without backlash, that there's probably something positive that I'm doing. Doesn't matter how big the channel or small the channel can be, but at least our community is particularly dedicated and seems to be fairly reasonable, fairly balanced. I can't say moderate even, but seems to know how to stand in line, right? And have a discipline, control, and reasoning further. These are all good signs. That's not really what you can say for most people out there, especially in politics. First act with, as the shockers, as those who talk about edgy stuff, and then as soon as they enter the more kind of famous arena, they immediately moderate their own opinions. Where it's embarrassing in a sense, and it shows how much credulity exists among the masses today. That's why 30,000, I think, few but good, and still sort of many enough to be relevant at this point. I always thought, also in the past years, that 30,000 would be sort of the most basic indicator of some conventional relevance among sort of in the smaller echelons of YouTube, to say, okay, well, that's, people kind of know you in general. I don't know how many impressions I made, but surely hundreds of millions. At this point, we have, again, millions of views. It's relatively easy, especially as considering how many videos I uploaded, but in a sense, like, it's not random. And I see people have kept coming. There isn't been really a saturation of Schwerpunkt attention. It seemed like early on this year that was something of that kind, but it's really just about the YouTube environment, how many channels are out there, the AI slop and all this stuff. So never commit the mistake of thinking you can sort of speak for me regarding what a channel is, but sort of be proud of being part of this, because you definitely contribute to it in a quite important way, right? I read all your comments, whether I disagree with them, whether I censor some of them. This has always been Schwerpunkt's policy. I've always been very clear about it, and also transparent, because sometimes I bring examples of comments I didn't allow for a reason, because in that sense they can distract the person. Believe me, YouTube is in that sense incredibly tricky, because if you are having a debate, a conversation, if say we're talking about forums, groups, that engagement is warranted, important. I frankly have never had time for that. I actually started YouTube because I didn't know how to actually initially cope with criticism. Actually, I believe that there would have been a much greater one. And then I discovered that most criticism on YouTube is merely sort of 3 words used to smear, and all the rest, if you're doing something good, is overwhelmingly positive. But in that sense, it's important not to distract people, because the main problem is attention retention on the video. So immediately, the first thing people do is it's easier to read a comment and see what other people think of this stuff rather than listening to all the 2 hours. So it's obvious that with a channel like Schwerpunkt, simply allowing every historical silliness to be told, or any sort of thing that's weird that happens to begin with. Like, I'm making like a 2 hours long video on this, and you have people commenting without understanding what I mean, and even people who make positive comments. I had to censor positive comments because they were really saying something that had nothing to do with what I was saying, claiming that was the case. And so if anybody reads that, like, it confuses them even more, especially if you're so confused to write something of that kind, and that's seemingly the most frequent kind of person that ever comments. All right, so I care about the community enough not to have that kind of engagement. Also because I don't really care. Like, my attitude with this is going straight without even minding about whatever happens around. Like, if you get what I'm saying, fine. And I'm not talking about individual subscribers or followers, not much. I'm talking about properly the entire social media space. However you can come across my content. I don't know how many even I don't know, more sort of quote unquote successful, at least I wouldn't say famous people, have watched my content. I see here people even, with tens of thousands of subscribers as well following me. So there is some reciprocity. I've been invited to discuss on other channels. That this is probably going to increase over time at some point, and I'm really thinking it's closer than we think. There is going to be a bigger channel that is going to criticize us. It must happen, and I am awaiting especially for that, so that I think with 2,600 videos, this thing will literally take off in an unprecedented manner. For channels, for example, that have just, I don't know, tens of videos because they highly craft them from a technical, visual point of view, and that it lasts just 20 minutes, maybe they make hundreds of thousands of views, but then it stops there. Like, it's well possible that I make more. It's very easy, actually, for most of these to be surpassed by mine views and reach at the same time. And that is going to be incredibly interesting, because as soon as Ignite, and I realize, in fact, that because there are so many videos to see and people will get curious about that and so on. And I have the distinct impression, not just that some channel has started a bit, sort of would be obvious considering all the stuff I upload. I've never accused anyone of doing that, but say starting to take some inspiration from my content. Let's put it like that. And I'm always a step ahead in terms of what you will hear that largely others don't have even a clue of. I am still one of those channels, or probably even the largest history channel on YouTube at this point, that has covered, or even among this anyone in absolute terms, the largest amount of historical topics that nobody has ever uploaded anything on the platform, albeit being very important historical topics, not niche, etc. Like some comments I had over the years were something you make so niche topics. I don't know, it seems to me that the topics I cover are so enormous, not just by importance, but by that standard, also by breadth, by scope, etc. This can't be niche. It's niche mostly referred to some sort of pop subcultural standard that means niche means I don't know that this thing existed, and it's maybe something that I personally learned when I was in primary school. So frankly, that's also generationally, unfortunately, what we have gotten to. Also, actually, more mature people often lack this, but I have also this impression that bigger channels at some point have deliberately avoided addressing me or responding also to some video commentaries / criticism that I made of them, because that would have opened sort of Pandora's box for them, and also benefited me indirectly, because that's mostly the point. Like, if a big channel with millions of subscribers answers you, and I'm not claiming that, I have someone in mind, not the bigger channels like the ones who make just documentaries, but certain sort of personalities that are more, in this sense, characterly, individually into the fray with their image and so on. I have deliberately tried not to ever cover anything about my channel, or not realize. And there is actually a reason. This is valid for the broader plethora of historical channels that are out there. The type of history I make may not be the most engaging by format, I would say. I would say it's likely, taken all together at this point in YouTube history, probably the best. I'm not modest about this at all, but like my videos, the topics, the depth, the criticism, etc., the quantity has covered by far sort of the best amount of historical sort of relevance on the platform, and I don't think it can be denied, especially at this point. So the problem may be, like, if this guy gets more views, I criticize him back maybe on something that he said wrong or whatever, but I'm still like a 1 million subscribers channels. I'm giving him, I'm feeding him, right? I'm giving him power, right? So people may take a liking of it and sort of not getting views from me. This is really typical. It's not like bigger channels have nothing to do than thinking about me. And I understand the pressure under which you are, but in that sense, you're not trying at that level even to put yourself in a condition that gives you less dopamine, in a sense. I'm not really dependent on this, because the channel, I can't say that pressure does increase over time. because you are really talking in front of thousands of people, and whatever response you get, it can be explicit, indirect, or whatever, it does come at you, right? It does shape you. Like, there is something about the internet here that is quite fascinating, quite powerful, and even dangerous, right? I think to have a healthy approach to this all, I see it also from the kind of videos that I make, really. But I wouldn't mind, of course, for the channel to rise. And I think at some point, the critical mass of this content will be so big that it will be impossible to prevent its fallout pretty much everywhere. And with 30,000 subscribers, I'm really starting to think that we are there, that we have properly reached the point where, even just psychologically, saying banally, it may not be a big deal, but 30,000 as opposed to 20,000 is going to bring more people in. Again, I see here that the subs. I don't know, because this uncertain, but most people don't have a public visibility regarding who subscribe. Just the sum of the names I can see of those who subscribe in these days. But here I know, as a matter of fact, the last subscriber is not the last. Here I'm at 30,004 something. I just surpassed it this morning. So I will not know the identity. It's merely, random. But just for saying, like, this trigger, right? The idea of saying, oh, well, but ever more people are coming, because you realize that they're starting to give you credit, even just on the basis of size, is an actual thing. Again, I don't know where this is going. I don't see, especially from this year, how, say, I get ever more stable views. Let's put it in this way. This is really unprecedented. Last year I made more absolute views, but there is also this view count on YouTube that I don't know whether it's being fixed or not. So I don't know whether people watch me so often like the display actually says, because this ads thing is something particularly complicated, because it turns out that you actually get the views, but YouTube does not count them. In fact, another thing that happened along that pattern is that even though views were down, income was always the same, because the mechanism by which the ads are watched and registered instead is different, and so YouTube didn't have a problem with that paradoxically, even though it was a problem stemming from ads, not making the machine register the views. And so again, it's something I don't want to even discuss, because it also didn't seemingly affect me in any particular way. That's why we're rising and so on. But I see here for the first time 30K on the on my channel's homepage, so it's really fantastic. So 30,000 subscribers, because this should be a thinking video, and it's sort of difficult to say something that doesn't sound cheesy or circumstantial or whatever. I would say this, talking about each one of the categories of people who follow me, also on other platforms, as a matter of fact. First of all, the viewers, that the most common, humble, rank and file Schwerpunkt viewer, in fact, the supporter. I thank all of you, because you may have even accidentally watched my channel. Many of these views are maybe even people stumbling on my first page, and you have the video with Beethoven starting, and you didn't even watch anything. You were not interested and you went away. But let's say for any person who, and I know again that there are lots of them out there, because YouTube tracks those that don't even have an account, that wouldn't message me. I mean, I have a private email and more, of course. But that, again, the silent majority was talking about before, and you appreciated the stuff, and you stuck around, and you really constitute the bulk of these views. I thank you paradoxically, in the most fundamental way. There's a lot that can be added on top of this, but there is this fundamental, literally understood as the foundation of something that is supposed to be also the source for all the other, the further engagement. Like you have done this as well. I thank you for the attention. I'm particularly glad that you sort of discovered me in this ocean of sort of very weird times in history, on the internet and social media and so on. Just know that you are likely not, unless you engage with my content, not likely to see me much anymore, because it's difficult. I've never really tried to search for myself outside of there. With the sort of devices that were already connected, I could easily get a skewed view of that. But I presume it's not that easy to find my content, even in the YouTube search, as a matter of fact. And that it's somehow disturbing. YouTube, for example, the YouTube searches were a very big source of views back in the day. It was actually the leading one. Today we don't even, we had more YouTube search views in, say, 2020 than today, even though the channel is disproportionately bigger, right? Several times. This depends naturally on what happened on YouTube, and how also, if, for example, I make a video about a very specific topic and I search for it, but nobody has uploaded anything on it, YouTube will show you all sort of vaguely related topics that made more views, because they think that people want to watch the videos that have already been more watched. And this is a paradox, in fact, that happens in my channel as well, that people tend to look at my more popular videos that are often old and accumulated views because of the different algorithm mechanics of several years ago. So it's very weird. I started at this point making way more views, say, for many videos at least, compared to those older ones, just in a shot. So things may easily change. I, as always, employed this saturation strategy. It was properly targeted at sort of having a pretty fishing, with a pretty wide net. And so the humble rank and file viewer is definitely appreciated, because he fell into the trap, unbeknownst of him. And but always responsibility is yours, tradition says. I'm joking, of course. Secondly, subscribers. Subscribers are very important because it shows commitment, so it shows interest. Even, again, if you're not staying around, I'm sure that, unfortunately, I don't know, this 30K, like, lots of people unsubscribed, and sometimes it happens literally because you don't use the channel anymore. I'm sure, unfortunately, somebody will have passed away even in the moment, just to focus on the dark side of the story. So this 30,000 are there. There are people who subscribe to thousands of channels, so at that point you will not find me anymore either. But I see that there is a ever more consistently engaged core of fidelized subscribers that are really they're really pulling the cart at large, the interest of quality and merit. And I could make names, but you can see them. You can see them on social media. You can see in the comments. They're always there. They're very loyal. They're here from years and years, and it's something fantastic. Even though I don't know you personally, there are some that are really making a fantastic job, sharing always my content, commenting, liking. That is amazing, frankly. And the very core of this is the one that, in fact, is responsible for the algorithm rebooting of the views. So if other people watch, like, from external audiences, that's basically your target on YouTube as well, and that's where the algorithm tests whether people are interested or not, and enlarges the channels following accordingly. Well, let's thank them as well, because their work is astonishing. I've seen people really helping me dramatically through also very ingenious means, frankly, of sharing, of at some point even spamming or something like that, and I really appreciate it. There is also a very particular core that exists from, I don't remember whether 2024, of this year, or whether 2024 or 2023, namely the members, right? So recently, as you've seen also in that video, my last Q&A, apparently if you search for me, if you pose questions, say, to Grok or ChatGPT, etc., like, these AI platforms are literally making up information about me. Many people, for example, want to know where I come from or whatever, like my ideology is or whatever, and these engines work just fishing stuff from the internet, but you easily realize, because I checked that also for historical information in general, not about me, I mean, that when they don't know how to answer something, they tendentially start making up information. And that's extremely dangerous, because at some point I was told, like, I heard this about you from Grok or ChatGPT, and I see, by the way, in analytics, the views from especially ChatGPT. I find it very interesting. I don't even understand where, I mean, if you ask about me on ChatGPT, okay, but where do you get a view to my channel through ChatGPT. I can't imagine the sort of the context. Maybe people ask what are the best history channel. I don't know. I should try to do that sometimes, but surely I don't think that I will come up. So that's something that I would like to understand to the hundreds of people that every month I see here come from such platforms. And I don't know. I don't remember how I got here. Yes, the fact that I've never really paid anything beyond a paywall, right? Under a paywall. Everything that I ever uploaded is here for you to see. There are just a bunch of videos that I think I lost during the uploads, or that I blurred for the images, the very old ones, etc. But I've never put any of my content behind a paywall, right? And I really never wanted to do it. If you remember, I monetized my channel because YouTube started monetizing it by itself. Right, that's the weird thing. If you start making enough views, even if you haven't monetized the channel, YouTube will do it for you. So you start seeing ads on your own videos, say, wait a minute, I didn't monetize. That's what I monetized, but I didn't think it was necessary for a long time. And now, of course, I'm glad about the income, but what I was saying here is the say that is, while it's not central, like I'm incredibly impressed by my members, by those who decided to, in this sense, without anything to unlock, if not stickers or, sort of few other things really, because there is nothing else, decided to pay the channel, right? Decided to give a fixed amount, and that at this point has surpassed, I think, thousands of euros. Maybe not, but I don't know. It's been really a lot. Historically, like, telling the truth, I've also had other sources of income, because initially I had PayPal, then I did it just through YouTube. In fact, PayPal donations stopped, so to say, but there are ones increased. I also have a Patreon, interestingly enough, because I haven't publicized this, and I really don't want to make a video, I have a Patreon account. But I at least inserted the link in the home page. So I see. Recently we had, by the way, I inserted different levels here of payment, also on Patreon, with the sort of traditional symbology at the bottom, and that's most of the members are. There's the snake, then there's the boar, the wolf, the bear, the tiger, and the eagle. And just the other day we've gotten to the bear, that I think is something like 24 euros, and it was the first time, and I think the bear here, that sort of my surname, my Germanic, the Germanic etymology of the same is exactly connected to the berserker, as a matter of fact. And I appreciate it very much to see the bear there roaring with this banknotes in its mouth. But jokes aside, it was very, very nice, and I really thank you for this, because again, I haven't asked you anything. I haven't blackmailed you in terms of, you want to watch this video, then pay me. Zero. But I'm receiving this money, and again, I find it extremely gracious. I am very grateful. I think that being grateful in this world is something very important for anything we have. So I haven't transformed this channel, of course, in a money-making machine. It's not really my first goal. It may be flattering having a secondary or multiple incomes. I'm not going to digress on that. Let's say what really strikes me is the dedication, the loyalty, the trust, the respect, the esteem. I mean, again, it is. I can't thank you enough for that specific moral dimension, right? So I appreciate that a lot, and I find it really the proof of an enormous commitment that, in this sense, I think comes from the work that I do, and that's the thing that matters the most. Right, that's the thing that struck me the most when I was, I don't know, even through my work, or I was paid by university, etc. Like, to me, it always seemed to me like too much. Like, I don't really think that, for example, salaries are adequately like mirroring in today's society, like what people actually earn for real. And I don't mean it in like people always do. Like, I want more money aside from financially policy, sort of monetary value and so on, but realistically, like, I wonder, how do people get paid? Like, does it really correspond to what they actually produce, in a sense? Fortunately, I don't have financial issues, so sort of whether on YouTube I get this or not, it doesn't really change anything about my my lifestyle. But again, I'm deeply appreciative of this as a measure of the appreciation for my work, and so that I can see a value and say, okay, this is what you've done. It's worth this thing, and I think it's fair to an extent. So that I appreciate very much. For this reason, I also appreciate outside of YouTube the single patron we have on Patreon, and anyone who decided to follow me there. The same goes for Facebook. That was an old one, and we have, I think, I don't know, have started lots of people adding me recently, especially from certain niches of, diorama makers. I don't know why, just start adding you because you seem like a palatable, addition. I don't know why they add people. There is also the Facebook page that has, I think, like 90 followers. And on Twitter have like 500, 400, something like that. So some of these are the same people, of course, but I see also how the channel is gradually reaching other shores, so to say. Other aspects that I find very interesting about this is that I have created finally a site, and I don't think I'm getting lots of views from that, but the problem is that this is a Google site. I also have the link again in the homepage that I created last year, and that Google decided to index only this year, although not really not really, if you pick because I insert all the videos there, the thumbnails and the description of the video, and I generate it through AI because it's boring. I take my own script, I put it in the AI thing, and it makes, say, 270 words, how much that is. And the point being, given the variety of topics that I covered, that at some point all the various elements of the page will be properly indexed, so to dramatically increase my Google search views that are somehow high. Let me check here from the analytics. I mean, not too high, but they have consistently increased over time, and I'm sure are possibly the most sort of, among the external views, definitely the most important source. So what the hell is this? Traffic source, and here we see from the external, again, it's modest, but I see, first of all, an increase recently, which, again, very interesting. Last year we did slightly more, we're coming back to that, and external, the majority should be Google search, and it's been increasing really importantly over time. So I wondered if creating a site that has all that information, by the way, through the search function within the site, you can find, say, if you really want to see, I haven't put all the videos there, but if you really want to see whether I sort of where I discuss about a topic, a very niche topic that you're interested in, just know that you can easily find everything that you want. Here I see something not greater than 120 views a day, but from Google, right? This means that this is not through the site. It's uniquely through Google search of some other thing. Many people from the outer space, so to say, have come to look at my channel, and at this point it's impossible, also given the amount of videos that I made, not to be seen there. So my impression is that Schwerpunkt is expanding against any algorithm, in fact, limitation, because the content is what it is in terms of sheer entertainment, visuals, or whatever. Actually, I think some of the videos I'm making now, especially, are very interesting. And I wouldn't necessarily watch myself if it were me, but I understand why many people would watch it, and they would find it interesting. Also because I use all historical imagery, even the AI stuff, I studied to be perfectly accurate, and it's based on other models. And at this point, AI has graphically really improved to the point I can make very historically looking, but importantly historically accurate images which was not possible just even 1 year ago. So things are skyrocketing, and that's the thing that it really makes you think, because there is a lot of uncertainty. The AI bubble will probably collapse. We've seen that AI is not even this great much. It's seemingly mostly spread in this kind of entertainment stuff, even though it's working behind the scenes in other ways, mostly like a secretary. Or a great part of how I manage to make these videos now is through the sheer speed that allows me to, I don't know, to write something better, to just find the usual references. And obviously I have always to check them in person, because say it's impossible, for example, to write a video script with AI, right? I've never done it. I've never, it's really unreliable. The AI is stupid. It's not able to have historical criticism. It's not able to be reliable. It makes up stuff. It's completely impossible to use that. But let's say if I have to write something better, all right, in English, for the script, for the sketch, that is quite useful. And I saved a lot of time thanks to that. In any case, what to say, the thanks will never be enough, at least from my perspective. I don't think I shouldn't even be here to thank you. I think it's implicit given what I do, and it always feels, as I said before, somehow rhetorical. But 30,000 is a solid result. It's something that from which you can take off, in a sense, in towards other direction. And this is, again, all thanks to your support, to your patience, to your effort in understanding my work. And I really appreciate it in turn, because it's not to be given for granted. Some of you, again, will say, but Schwerpunkt, where do we go from here? Well, we're going somewhere very precise. And again, it may not be easy for me to explain that, right, to you, but I surely well know what it is. And you can see it throughout all my content, through the new videos, things we really do every day, and the way we interact. And I'm going to provide that through history, because I would like really to stress this, that regardless of all part of the reason also why this channel, again, hasn't sort of skyrocketed yet, and probably it's not even so likely to do it, right, unless something in the algorithm goes crazy. But it's possible, it's increasingly possible. What I see, in fact, what really satisfies me is that all these subscriptions have been solidly wanted by the subscribers, haven't been accidental. They are the product of a solid approach and trust in my historical accuracy. This is incredibly important. To establish that bond means way more than anything. And when I see somebody unsubscribing in general, I don't have a negative feeling out of that. Like the dopamine, the only dopamine you get from this, in modest degree, again, I'm not addicted or anything, or dependent by any stretch of the imagination, but let's say I feel it when you look at, especially at views, you look at engagements, right? But when I see in subscribers increasing, yes, but decreasing, oddly enough, it does not do the opposite. It does not make you nervous or angry, frustrated about this. It's actually almost a catharsis. It's purifying, because you say it's better for this beautiful number here that is growing not to have the element that does not want to be here, that disagrees, that does not appreciate, that is not aware. It can stem from many reasons. It can stem obviously from my own mistakes, but at that point I also think if I make mistakes, I deserve for people to unsubscribe. So it's perfectly fine, and that's again why I've never chased the bigger numbers or whatever. I'm perfectly content with what I have. This is the main reason. But perhaps the most important thing about this channel that makes it misunderstood to an important degree is the fact that the goal is, in a sense, merely historical, right? That history is the gateway to an enormous amount of things, and it's not the history that you've usually thought in that sense. Because I make really original, alternative, unheard of stuff, and that's something, again, that I think I'm stern but fair. You realize that my judgment in absolute terms is something that is heavily polished through historical research, so that whenever I evaluate something, whether it's political, moral, personal, it is essentially stemming at this point from a massive historical bias, meaning professionally, if I have to assess something, I don't think like how, I don't know, what my general opinion is, how I feel, or how others may react to me. It's always my brain immediately rewires to, but what does this actually mean in a sort of diachronic and comparative perspective, a historical one, right? I have to find the answer for that, because my primary interest in history since I was little was explaining things. What happened? Why? Right? Not simply telling a story, not sort of making people look at just at one facet or another. If not, of course, there is no time. Sometimes we cover, again, enormous topics, and we need to make hundreds of videos on the same to fully understand it. But let's say the ultimate point of this channel, that I think that the ultimate goal in a historical sense is to actually get to a solid result. All right. And that's why, to me, telling you again what all I have in mind for the channel and how this has to go, etc., is premature. Not because I don't want that or I don't see how it can happen, but because it's something that I prefer to enact than to just talk about. And history is the key through it at the same time. And that's what I think makes the channel most misunderstood, because it's not fundamentally a political channel. It's not even a religious channel, if you think about it. It's truly all about history, and a type of history that people do not have familiarity with. And that challenges all the rest through it, as a matter of fact. So there are deep, by the way, that's also an interesting topic. There are deep and massive historical implications in the things I explain. Like, it's the topics themselves, as you understand, are very often contentious. There is, at sort of immediately instinctual, sensitive level, the feeling of whether audience like, from my side, for example, you can see it also among there, whether an audience likes a certain historical topic or not, whether they want to be exposed to a particular historical realization or not, right? This allows you to analyze people in a way that you don't imagine, even psychologically speaking. And I think that history is a bit like a cure as well. It shows you why things are the way they are, because at the end of the day, my personal goal is also to properly assess them. Because you can't, aside from my work as a historian for real, quote unquote, the channel is, of course, partially a reflection of that dramatically helped me in my job, as a matter of fact. But that also, were it just something based on itself, like, would immediately tell you that if someone recovers historical topics of 2,600 videos lasting hours each, obviously this person perhaps has something to say that you want to hear about, that you can't sort of escape from if you want a solid historical realization. I have always thought that history, I see of the various ways of conceiving history, history as a method. All right. But in this sense, the more I went on with history and the more I refined my method, I think that history is primarily a matter of expertise. That is to say, the way you handle the method as well, which may be, in fact, may wildly vary. You would be surprised, especially how differently historians really work like, even when they actually achieve very good results. And that has to do with the vastity of history. It's not, in fact, how they... It is how to use the sources, but it is because they are informed by a mind that knows how to handle them, to search for them, to associate them. It's not like history simply revealing itself, or at least that's mostly the story, what happened in the past, but it's the story you want to tell, in that sense, is always biased, not in the sense that you're trying to make it up, but that your expertise and so your accuracy will increase the more you have seen history, the more you have been swimming upriver, right? And the bigger the muscles have become. Because in that sense, you can't say, well, I was going the opposite direction, because otherwise your muscles wouldn't really develop in the same way. You're really going towards the spring, the source of the current, and as such, you're literally oriented towards the thing that literally happened. So at some point, when you go to a conference, when you talk with colleagues, etc., what they actually care about is not what kind of source you used, or at least that is very important in a sense, but that's just the starting point. What they really want to know is what you got to as a person, what your judgment, what your eyeballing is, right? How do you know something? In a history is so complex, and that is easily metaphysical, just in essence. Like, you can't say that it's merely a deterministic, materialistic landscape scenario. It's not even the opinion through which you look at history, which many people confuse this all with. Like, to say you have a bad knowledge of history, then your opinion is bad, all right? And so it's not worth it as the one of a person who has seen more than you. And so regarding being grateful, for example, what history teaches you in a quite humbling fashion is that while you have all the right to sort of pursue your own historical interest and even following your bias as intuition, as sort of preference for a topic or another, every time you are confronted with evidence and every time you talk with, also you just work when you write articles, when you thought that you knew everything, and then there is another thing coming by, and that, especially the more experience you have, the more it can be put to fruition, right? In this world of hyper-specialization, for example, you find people who have written, for example, I often publish about battles, right? That's what I'm into, not only, but as you know, I specialize in tactical reconstruction. For example, once I found the article of a person who had written about this battle, but she was essentially assessing just whether a person had participated into it or not, whether it was, and it was mostly making a social assessment, like, was it possible for that person to have been in that role in the battle? What was the community came from? It had nothing to do with the warfare of it. And paradoxically, at that point, that intuition helped me to sort of dramatically resonated, for example, with some doubts that I had as well, having analyzed the thing from a military point of view or not. So that, for instance, seems to me, so you can immediately, that's where authority enters the scene. Because at that point, if you already know, you can immediately tell the world whether that thing seems more or less likely, without having to repeat the entire work that you have done. And this is what apparently, at least up to a few time ago, the main, for example, even criticism towards my channel, the fact that I don't publish sources. Look, those channels who do just use Grok listing 20 books that I haven't even read from the most updated thing, and that's it, right? They're not more reliable. Do not make the asinine mistake of confusing historical reliability or formality with accuracy, right? They're truly two different things. They can entwine, but they may not, as a matter of fact. And so history is a pretty dangerous game. And I would invite anyone who's interested in my work, also to critical aims, to be aware of the fact that all what we have done here is enormous, all right? And so these 30,000 subscribers are the proof of that reliability, are the proof of the patience, of the sort of the polishing, the refinement that this channel has carried out uninterruptedly since its beginning. And that already at the time, because I know my sources, I know my curriculum, my background, were actually pretty solid since the beginning. So imagine, do this thing for several years in parallel to an actual profession, and it's as if this thing went on steroid. And that's the thing that I think you reward me for with this milestone, and the donations and the views and talking about me and all this stuff, because it is the history that we have made together here that truly matters, that really is at the center of the attention. And again, I'm just a meager medium of that, and I hope to do well. Like, it happens to make mistakes, but say, again, the more you do, and the less that happens. And so if the fundamentals are right since the beginning, it's a bit difficult. And that's when people have difficulties to accept that also certain political, moral, personal opinions are not really subjective, right? This has been hard. Remember the Reddit crowd. The Reddit crowd wanted to sort of, not to slam me, but they were actually also fairly sort of critically fair, let's put it in this way, to an extent. But the thing was always this perennial distrust, like, who is this guy? We have to rate him. We have to do it, because the Redditors are overwhelmingly liberal. They are, as such, normally distrustful, paranoid, ungrateful, and so on. So they would like you, especially as a right winger, as a conservative, as a traditional, creator in this sense, to to slam you, or to do something like to smear you, whatever. But it turns out it doesn't work like that. It turns out that if you want to make a point, either you bring the evidence, either you are able to extend your vision on the whole horizon, or you don't really have much business in this field. And that's what, as historians, we find out the hard way. For example, I hope to be published on, I will not say which journal, but it's for medieval, I will not say which one, because otherwise you will understand. Let's say it's big, all right? And at that point, I'm sure that some of you, at least those who are more into academic, will not just read me, but possibly even recognize me. Excuse me, drink a little. And at that point, you realize there is always a filter. There is always, especially when you publish for other countries in a foreign language, etc. It's always different. It's a way of bit of change, rendering your mind a bit more malleable, a bit more open, and you do measure your provincialism. You do measure your own limits, your own bias, what is merely subjective, what is a narrative that, for example, has remained unchallenged, that you have exaggerated on, and that others will fight against. And paradoxically, I must say that this is some of the, it constitutes really some of the greatest satisfactions in my professional life, that I don't want to brag about it. I will never say I'm a great historian, right? I'm so, capable of it. But I must say about myself that I have a great intuition. And I think historically speaking, that is incredibly relevant, right? Sometimes this can bring to overinterpretation. Without proofs, again, without evidence, it's a bit difficult to do that. I can assure you that, by the way, what I talk about on Schwerpunkt is in this sense, it's actually very historical, because my top priority whenever I prepare this video is for them to be documented on solid evidence that can't be equivocated. Then there is the expertise, the experience, as I was saying before, that brings you to say, oh, okay, but we've already seen this here and there. You can bring in everything that overwhelms, or also maybe the listener. That's also, my videos are so long. But in terms of historical originality, the capacity of looking at history not as a paste and copy mechanism dependent on scholarship, depending on essentially just what others have said. If you're able to substantiate with enough passion to make the job of research, and being sort of for a long time alone researching, spending a lot of time, and then working on it, is incredibly rewarding, because at that point you're literally opening new spaces nobody really thought much that quite existed. And then you have to try to be as open as you can in general about these topics. And Schwerpunkt is a great let out for this, because if I stayed focused just on my doctoral, my academic research, I would fundamentally not be able to think history the way I do to be currently published. I wouldn't, vice versa, like without that competence, tell you certain things on YouTube with a confidence that I have. But in this sense, remember that criticizing something that you don't understand does not mean that the other person is wrong per se. Like the other person may be sometimes obscure. I'm talking about me, of course. Like in my videos, I always say things that I've already said, I don't know, in other hundreds of videos, and people may criticize me because they hear this stuff for the first time. They're maybe new subscribers. They have literally no idea that I talk about this for hundreds of videos. So that's why also 30,000 subscribers is very important, just to gain visibility, appreciation, and say, what did this guy actually do? I have ever more people say, but where have you been all this time? I had never heard of you. You're so underrated. You have all this stuff. How do you do it? We may be fighting against a mechanism that willingly or unwillingly prevents us from properly expanding further. And part of this, I fear, is due to laziness, to also some sort of gatekeeping. I don't want to sort of criticize my followers for that, because I don't think it's the attitude, the prevailing attitude. But I understand, deep psychologically speaking, that when you have something that you deem to be precious enough and you fear to be overly popularized, etc., like you want, maybe you just keep it for yourself. You just draw information from here, and then you just wait and see. I can tell you, in my case, if you fear that with a larger audience and support, I'm going essentially to change my work, my fundamentals, my values, that's not going to happen. And I don't mean it in a sclerotic sense, because again, I dramatically developed my values through these years. But in the sense, I don't see how this thing could ever evolve or, take a wrong turn or whatever, because I'm not that kind of person. And I know it's very cliche. There is this idea, especially about historians as they're criticized on the internet. And again, this stuff mostly comes from Reddit, because that's where they like to dissect this thing. And I can't say that I was particularly, overly discussed or whatever. Actually, like, part of the reason why I'm not visible is that they didn't discuss me. But I see this with many other historians, especially for the right wing, that in many cases are really very bad channels, are very bad authors, bad creators, and they don't know what they're talking about, because let's be honest, YouTube standards are objectively terrible. And in fact, you have this tendency, this proclivity of putting everything in the same basket and saying, okay, well, YouTube historians are terrible. And in particular, at least from a liberal perspective, of course, like, right-wing YouTubers always say the same thing, always act in the same way. And methodologically, there is, especially in a more generic sense, the fact that YouTube historians tend to just essentially focus on a few things that they know. They start over interpreting that, and they start taking some sort of weird philosophy on their own. And that's why for years the biggest question is, what is Schwerpunkt's ideology? Because they want always to tag you. This is in particular a very American thing to do, and it's just not very good. It just shows you how sort of quick to judgment without actual work and research people are, right? And unfortunately for them, like, what I've been doing on this channel is unique on YouTube. You will not find anyone who's done anything remotely comparable to what I achieved in these years. And again, I'm not saying this in a merely sort of historical sense. I'm saying it literally, like, nobody does what I actually and factually do every day, as you see, right? And so nobody produces this large amount of videos, nobody produces such long videos at the same time, nobody actually talks about these topics, nobody actually does it in the way I do, and I would dare say with the depth and criticism that I do. So whatever this is unheard of. I don't know anyone who does what I do, and I realize that there are YouTubers that do something similar, definitely not at the scale I do. Right, and so obviously there are very good experts out there that talk, etc. But even there, when you get into this business, you get ever more sensitive, in a way, to the way others do things as well, because you are in their shoes. You have been there at some point, and your sensitivity, in a way, to what is said on YouTube and the way you can explain it to others is very high. This is the greatest change on Schwerpunkt as well, that in order to explain things, first of all, I had to make sense myself. At the beginning of the channel, it wasn't like that. At the beginning of the channel, it was seriously boring and dull and annoying to listen to me, right? Today may be the same, but it's much better, to say the least. And most of this stems from the fact that the ultimate goal is make you understand what I'm talking about. First and foremost, and so it's a historical explanation, but it's tailored on the type of, not even on the average person that can listen to, because again, lots of people listen to me, but even in years, they may not really understand what I'm talking about, sadly enough. But I thank those two. But I say, remember that this is not a channel designed for pleasure, entertainment. This is for research, for reflection, at also at best, in a broader sense, you should make a much tougher work to sort out exactly what I'm doing here. And especially if you don't have all the time in the world, nobody has watched all my content, for example. And that's also very interesting card in the sleeve that I can play. But in general, when you listen to those other people making those kind of statements on YouTube, you start thinking, this is too superficial. I would never go out there to someone trying to explain them these things, and make it so simple, making it so superficial, making it so, okay, I just come from this and I try to cram this on you. No, to me, and I think this is also a consistent part of why you follow me, is about me taking the time to actually explain to you the story. And I think that, again, this is interesting and challenging at the same time, because again, especially if you've not been exposed to what I've been exposed, if you haven't been into my own shoes, and this is normal for everybody on earth, as a matter of fact. We're all that different. We all have that different background, and we can sort of align on certain things, but at large, we all come with different bias, right? So we always have something to learn from one another. But at that point, if you think, for example, that the most important thing is an ideology, just because you can't see where that comes from, it is going to be a problem. Again, it's completely normal to disagree with me, especially if you're young, nationally liberal, and or starting to be like the newer generations at large, properly postmodern, like something probably like history does not exist anymore. It's not even used as a reference. It's just some strange fictional thing you have heard of, but you know nothing about. And my hope in this generational sense is that some young mind listens to my content and starts saying, look, here there is enough I can use maybe to grow myself. And that I found, again, inspirational, that all the time somebody has asked for my opinion or all this stuff. That's why I'm also trying to make this channel as encyclopedical as possible. We have been substantially expanding, especially in the last couple of years, into modern contemporary warfare. I think that was one of the most important steps that I decided to take, because I always wanted to do that, but for years I wouldn't take that step. It's not like because I was worried, but because I believed that like my content was rarefied, covering so many different topics at a time. If I did, considering that I didn't have many views, I didn't have many reach, if I sort of kept everything dispersed, even through the saturation strategy, I would have not been able to create a specific core, right? This has been a great work, and we've been fixing a bit the mechanism also through which we make videos. This is not a channel update video, but for example, like our topic choice, that has sensibly changed over the years. Like we had to fix that a little bit. There were some gaps that could not afford to maintain, right? So we're not really going too far. There is really a lot of good content that we are really creating ex novo, and we're filling all those gaps that we had left open. And at this point, I can say that we really have very good content, that we're really doing a good job in maintaining that standard of variety and at the same time cohesiveness that our work really deserves, right? And so your participation is fundamental, because having 30,000 people witness into this and being able to report it to others, to have some further in-depth analysis of my content, to just simply enjoy it, to just be properly presented history through, let's say, is incredibly important. And again, never underestimate the topics I make, right? Because in a way or another, there is something. It's as if I was telling you, look at this, because this is not random. This is not just a topic I make for the views or for the engagement, whatever. I do it because this particular thing is novel. And I know that YouTube, unfortunately, has habituated us to basically not be surprised of anything anymore. Like, I would say from the early 20s now, the palette, the roster of content that you could find on YouTube is just designed to tell you, oh my God, I'd never heard of this thing. Like the bigger channels especially tend to do that anymore. But at some point it becomes dull, because if you make 20 minutes long videos about this, and even at most you post every few days, look, you're never really going to cover the core of this. And these channels sometimes don't want to repeat themselves, so they can make the millions of views, but they are teams. What I'm doing here is completely a one-man operation, and I am picking these topics not for a mere variety necessity, so to say, but because the individual topics, I think, are importantly meaningful, and they are entwined with the whole work that I've done. You can't watch a video that I made about whatever that is not connected with maybe one of the most distant topics in time and place that I covered in another. For example, it's all one, right? There is a single cohesive unity in all this, which is designed exactly to complete a broader picture. If we don't get this, it's going to be a bit difficult to appreciate the channel at the fullest. So YouTube, again, is scary because you can get lots of views as few ones. You never understand what is really going on. But at the same time, there is always the hope that even for a temporary loss, you can sort of attract other people. Because, again, this is also challenging. Sometimes you say, but you know that there are those topics that people want to see, right? It would make really big views, etc. Why don't you do them? Because if you were just about that, you will also exhaust that. Instead, taking the time to make also videos about topics that people wouldn't watch otherwise, I think would is greatly helping probably the connectivity of this tissue, right? That's the single most important aspect, in my opinion. We could have not had this enormous library of Schwerpunkt if we hadn't properly showed how people could get lost into it, which maybe YouTube, the way it's structured, doesn't really invite you to do. I think that playlists or stuff like that were much more important in the past. Nowadays, everybody does what they have to do in a broader sort of commercial sense, right? But I'm here for the historical connectivity first, rather than in the content, of course, itself, than any other aspect. And that's why I think it's relevant, and we should sort of chase that, and we should also care about the ultimate outcome of this. And that's where you come into play more than ever, because whether this channel skyrockets depend on you, right? I've always said, even when we were 10,000, let's assume that even just 100 people shared the stuff every day on other channels, on social media, etc. You could easily take this to the moon overnight. And I'm not kidding. Like, you could easily do it. Like, let's assume, I don't know, 10,000 subscribers a month. It's not even that much if you think about it. But truly, at this point, it's become, people don't even know that I exist for all this time. Why? This is a visibility issue as well. Because again, exposure was there, but it wasn't crazy. Like, lots of people generally, I think, don't know that we exist. Also because it turns out that the more, as people are exposed to my content, they tend to subscribe also at a higher rate than normal. So how is that, right? There must be something to it. The channel is serious enough. We're going to expand on all the possible topics. And we're also probably going to get a bit more, not controversial, but we're going to make topics that, in this sense, are difficult to approach sometimes. Again, we're talking sort of different topics, especially modern contemporary history. It's plenty of them that we still haven't gotten there, as a matter of fact. But I know that you care about it, and it's a way to test my not much where I stand or how I stand in that sense. So how reliable I am going to be for further insight. And we're going really to expand brutally on that path. I really see, especially at the beginning of 2026, as we go on, that we're going to do very good stuff. And I have, for the holiday season, also some very interesting content prepared a doc for you. Admittedly, at this point, I also have an immense reserve. I don't know how many, like, we're talking about hundreds of videos that are already prepared, not in, and that I can sort of send you at some point, but we really have pretty heavy stuff as well. I can't wait in that sense for us to expose it, and it's cool stuff, and there is fresh new stuff in that way for how long as you can imagine, without mentioning that the same cycle, the same lottery provides us with extraordinary topics in and of themselves that are really necessary, and they constitute a bit the backbone of same channel. All right, but we're really doing something here, and we are stepping up dramatically, and I'm really glad to announce you that we're going to hit very hard, especially in the next weeks. I'm preparing something. We'll see what we can do in some broader sense, but this is what Schwerpunkt has always been about: pretty new, cool topics that also other channels do not really quite cover, and in all the depth that they really deserve, because that's also what we're here for in an ultimate sense. And again, as I said, history is the word. I could really say much else. I could never thank you enough, as I already said. But frankly, this is fundamentally what I wanted to tell you, and I really, truly, I'm very grateful for this milestone. I really appreciate all your support. I'm not celebrating the number, and celebrating every person that did so, which is something different to me. Yes, when the count rises, I do see just numbers, but I do know there are people behind it, and that's the most powerful thing, and that really matters. So as we continue growing, because we're going to continue doing so, I thank you enormously, and just know that the more we are in that sense, the more strength we have at our disposal, and I'm not going to let you down. This is a promise. So again, I enormously thank you. I'm not going to end in the same way like the other videos. I'm going to, of course, pretty much sort of make you understand that this is important. All right, it's important, and I feel extremely grateful for all you do. I thank you enormously, as always, and I'll simply show you that along the way, as I've always done, hopefully. And I think this 30,000 is there to show that you do acknowledge that as well. So it's really mutual, and I appreciate it enormously. I really hope that you're doing great. That also, we'll talk about this later in the weeks, but you're going to have a fantastic holiday season, and I can't wait for us to go on this journey and to bring Schwerpunkt where we really didn't even think we could arrive. So thank you very much for the 30,000 to the 30,000 subscribers, and to any other person who's out there that doesn't count in the subscriptions, but is following us in the same or even more dedicated way. And I wish you a great time, and see you next time. Bye.